Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series, and for a spontaneous episode to talk about Arsenal's supposed interest, reported interest in Chelsea striker Tammy Abraham. Now, we will, of course, cover this in extra detail along with all of the latest Arsenal transfer information on tomorrow morning's 8 a.m. show. If you are new to the channel, we run a daily 8 a.m. show UK time. We'll be on episode 74 tomorrow morning. It's been a big commitment all summer, but I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please make sure you're dropping likes on the videos and subscribe to the channel to make sure you never miss any content. But our Let's Talk Arsenal series is very much more of a communicative kind of discussion-based show in which I get a lot of your thoughts and feelings in the chat box, find out how you guys are feeling about this, and ultimately have a really honest and respectful discussion about this topic. Now, I put the question into the chat box, and I put the question on the head of the show asking, should Arsenal buy Tammy Abraham? Because I wanted to see initially the reaction to this, and I've already seen quite a lot of early comments on the show, such as no and no. It's coming up in the comment sections, and it isn't very kind of interesting to me that it's a very, very straight not for me, not interested, and I want to know why. So in the chat box, simple answer, yes or no. That's your only choices. But instead of just, throwing out just one word answers, let me know your explanation for the choices. Tell me why you do or do not want to see a Tammy Abraham at Arsenal next season, and give me some information as to why you've come to that reason, because I think there's some genuinely good arguments to be had from both perspectives. I don't think it's as simple as just casting him aside and saying, no, not for me, not interested in this player. And I don't think it's as easy as saying, yeah, 100% we should be going for him as our main striker for the upcoming season. I think it's a very good kind of interesting topic of debate to have around Tammy Abraham and the type of striker and the nationality that he is as well, that maybe affects opinion and the club that he plays for as well, too, having an impact on the social and psychological view of signing Tammy Abraham. So let's see what you guys are saying in the chat box. Osman says, should Arsenal sign Tammy Abraham? No, he's not top class. He will obstruct Balogun and Martinelli as he's still young. On a psychological level, for Chelsea to keep dumping their rejects at us is not good. Now, of course, let's talk about the Chelsea factor. Actually, first things first, let's actually look at the story before we go into any more kind of detail, so we are all fully aware of what we are getting ourselves into. So according to The Telegraph and the Beautiful Game podcast that did tweet this out as well, Arsenal have interest in bringing in the 23-year-old from the Champions League winners last season. Supposedly, he would cost a figure in the region of £40 million, which is a lot. But for a 23-year-old striker that has a very decent scoring record in the Premier League, it does make sense. He's also been an Arsenal fan, as he says. To be honest, I was an Arsenal fan. He says to the Bristol Post, it didn't make any difference at Chelsea when you're young and you choose who to support. It's a family thing. Luckily for me, it was a family thing, so it wasn't really a problem at Chelsea. Someone I looked up to was Thierry Henry. His variations of finishing, his movement, the way he dribbles. Someone like that has a key impact on me. I would love to be as big as him and maybe even better. Self-confidence is always good. It's never something that you should look over and say it's arrogance. I appreciate that in a striker always. It's what makes the great strikers the great strikers. Let's talk about the Chelsea thing. Arsenal obviously taken Petr Cech so far, David Luiz and Willian from Chelsea, who have been surplus to requirements at the club. Have these deals worked out for Arsenal? No, they haven't. David Luiz is the best of the bunch by a long distance, and actually probably justified his £8 million price tag at the time across the 2 years that he was at the club. The issue is with comparing them to Tammy Abraham is that it's slightly different. Tammy Abraham is not a player that's reaching the end of his career. He's not a player that you would look at and go, yeah, clearly he's being cast aside because he doesn't get into the team because he's not good enough. That's not the situation with Chelsea. Chelsea have obviously invested a lot of money in Timo Werner, and they also are looking to invest even more money in Erling Haaland this summer, which obviously changes the dynamic of the club. So I wouldn't necessarily look upon Abraham and going, wow, Chelsea are casting him out, so therefore we shouldn't be going for him because of that reason, like we saw with, say, Willian, Petr Cech, and to a lesser extent, David Luiz as well. I think it's slightly different to those kind of profile. So I wouldn't be so quick to say we don't need to see any more Chelsea rejects coming to Arsenal. However, and this is a really good point that I think was brought up a little bit earlier on, Balogun is a very interesting profile for Arsenal. He's still young, 20 years of age, pushing for a Premier League kind of place in the squad this summer. And the fact that Arsenal's still already got 2 strikers at the club. We've got Lacazette and we've got Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang at the club. And I can't see really Arsenal going for a striker this summer in general. I especially can't see Arsenal going for a striker this summer if they don't move on one of Lacazette or Aubameyang. And then the other point is to say that, is it worth bringing in a 23-year-old striker who would be a long-term option at least the next 4 or 5 years? Then what happens to Balogun? Because Arsenal tended to only play with 1 striker systems. And one of the big problems that we made for ourselves was when we brought in Lacazette, 6 months later, we paid another £50+ million to bring in Aubameyang. And then that's kind of been a bit of an issue of dynamic for us going forwards. There's a lot of kind of conflicting things. The other positive for Abraham is the fact that he's got as we talked about before, when he's given the impetus to be the main striker at a club like he was under Frank Lampard during the 1920 season, he had a great campaign. He'd scored 15 goals in 30-something appearances, nearly a goal every 2 games. And for a Premier League standard, it was very good. He's also got the situation whereby he can create as well. He's got 6 assists across that season for Chelsea, 4 in the Premier League, 1 in the Champions League and 1 in the UEFA Super Cup as well. He's got that element to his game too. He's quick, he's adapted, he's kind of already adapted to the Premier League, definitely. So to cast him off so frivolously, I think, would be an error. I'm not saying that saying no to him is the wrong decision. I'm just saying to say simply no, it's not the right choice. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat box, though. Rahil says, Tammy is not a £30+ million striker. He's faster. He's a fast striker who can also play as a winger. I see what you mean. He's not 30+, of course, in terms of age. Yes, he's mobile. He's very adaptive. He's dynamic in a forward line. He's quick, and that would certainly help. He's also quite tall and good in the air. So that's another dynamic that he would add to Arsenal, definitely. Lee G says, yes, young, English, and has proven Premier League quality. Ilyas says, Tammy Abraham is the worst choice ever for our centre-forward. Ilyas, let me know. I want to know your reasoning. I want to know why it is that you don't want to see Tammy Abraham at Arsenal instead of just throwing out solid no's. I want to hear some reasoning. James S says, no, depending on Aubameyang and Lacazette are here next year. If they both go, I think it's a great signing. If not, it will just block the likes of Martinelli and Balogun. So again, James pointing out the key point that it is very much tied to the fact that we've got kind of all these other variables going on at the moment with our striking department. It is also a lot of money for a window in which we don't know how much money Arsenal have got to spend. And if we're prioritising 40 million quid on a striker, 50 million quid on a centre-back, when I looked at the summer and I went, right, well, we need a right-back, we need a centre-mid, we need an attacking mid, and all of a sudden we're spending near 100 million quid on a striker and a centre-back. It is a little bit strange. Although in the sense of Arsenal, historically, square pegs, round holes and all that. So there is an element of irony to it, I suppose, that does make it make a little bit more sense. But still, it's one that's good for the discussion. Jacob Zarbo, another one of our fantastic members, says, no, he is a good player, but I don't think he will improve us. Feel like Danny Welbeck type of signing. Calvert-Lewin might cost the same, and I'd rather get him. I think Calvert-Lewin, Jacob, would cost a little bit more. You're looking at upwards of 60 to get someone like that, especially already in the England team. Really solid, consistent Premier League striker for Everton. Starting striker as well in comparison to someone like Abraham, who is surplus to requirements at Chelsea. So there is that element to this. But I see your comparison. Danny Welbeck is an interesting one. Different period of time when he did join from Manchester United, and he did a decent job, but he was never looked upon as a player that, you know, could really crack on and be Arsenal's main striker or even a wide player for us going forwards. Abraham, I feel like has the quality to be a good Premier League striker going forwards and develop maybe into a great Premier League striker with the qualities and the potential that he has. It's just not yet been unlocked fully. And the arrival of Timo Werner for Chelsea last season did interrupt that development that seemingly was going quite well at this, or especially during that 1920 season. Let's see if some people have replied and added on to what we were talking about. Tammy says, Tammy not good enough. If we want to win the league, is he better than Martinelli or Lacazette? The answer is no. It's interesting you say if he's not better than Lacazette, because Lacazette's never outscored Abraham's 15-goal Premier League season in his last 3 years. You might say that's because of a lack of continuous starts, but still hasn't beaten that 15-goal tally that Abraham brought in. Lacazette has struggled to find a consistent and high amount of goal scoring at Arsenal. So it's interesting that we simply say he's not better than Lacazette right now, because I think there is a solid argument to say that they're actually very much closer than people may give them credit for. However, does that mean that we should go out and sign him for a player that's very similar and not necessarily an upgrade on what we've already got? again, you're thinking about the other side of the argument. It's very difficult to come to that conclusion. Peter Renner says, question is, would Tammy take us to the next level? I don't think he would, not right now, and the fans would not have the patience to wait. And Peter's very much in line with my way of thinking about when you ever look at a signing, you need to take a number of things into account. Does this player get into other top 6 teams in the league? Does he get into United? No. Does he get into City? No. Well, he might do now because they haven't got a striker. Does he get into Chelsea? Obviously not, because they're looking to sell him. Does he get into Spurs? Not with Harry Kane there. Does he get into Liverpool? That's an interesting one. Does he get into Liverpool? Would a Roberto Firmino, who is aging and moving on, would Abraham do a decent job? I actually think he would do a decent job at Liverpool with the amount of service that he would get. Does he improve upon what they've had in Firmino? Probably not. But I think he would be a decent option for them actually going forwards. Does he improve on what Arsenal have got already? Not right now. No, he probably doesn't improve on what we've got right now. And that means for me, in general, the striking department is an area of the pitch that I don't think Arsenal need to spend too long on this specific summer window. But again, it's always important to look at those factors and those that you brought up about Balogun and Martinelli as well, who, by the way, I don't particularly see Martinelli as a future striker. I see him very much more as a wide goal-scoring forward player. But, you know, he might prove me wrong. Fingers crossed he does. Clem says, Abraham would be a good squad player, but he won't revolutionise Arsenal. My only concern is if we are looking to sell Abraham in 3 or 4 years' time, will the profit be interesting enough? And that's the thing, is if you're signing a player at this level to always look to sell them on, I don't think that's the right thing to do. However, what I would say is that you shouldn't skip over the idea of sell-on value. If you're going to invest a lot of money in a player, you want to make sure that that investment has the opportunity to grow and sustain itself over a number of years, which would happen if you were to buy Tammy Abraham and you were going to play him. The playing him part is where you're going to find more questions. If he says, how much is he? The Telegraph report that £40 million is what Chelsea would be asking for, which for those that go, wow, that's ridiculous, it isn't that ridiculous. From a Premier League to Premier League club transfer, as we're seeing with Ben White right now, that's about the going rate for a striker of that area. And whilst I think all of the metrics and the profile and the goal-scoring talent makes sense if Arsenal wanted a striker, with what we've got already and what we need to address this summer, that side of things makes me think, no, this doesn't actually make too much sense. Jashar says, Tom, what is the rumoured price? We said £40 million is the rumoured price. Venkatesh says, want us to see signing someone who can play like Benzema. Any player on your radar with the potential to kind of be that Benzema replacement going forwards? Obviously, when you describe a Benzema, you think of someone that's lethal in front of goal, but at the same time, does bring in his teammates into play. And Benzema is that. Benzema is one of the biggest reasons why Cristiano Ronaldo succeeded so much at Real Madrid, is because he had Benzema with him the entire time to really enable him and be a big creator for him. That's why his assist kind of ratings were huge and off the charts at times for an out-and-out striker. Is there a player out there that would be like a Karim Benzema for Arsenal, would be able to be the creator as well as someone who scored goals? And it's a really tough question. You look at certain players in the Premier League like Roberto Firmino, who's kind of gone down the other way of things, really, I suppose, and moved away from goal scoring and has gone solely into kind of creation, and that's why his goal scoring like targets and outcomes aren't that great. I always thought strikers in the mold of an Andre Silva could do that role with how they hold up play and can bring others into play. We used to have it with Olivier Giroud as well. You look at strikers that are going across the continent. You look at Gerard Moreno at Villarreal, loves to bring other players into the game as well. And Unai Emery's got him playing in that way at Villarreal. But again, he's towards the older end of the 20s scale, so wouldn't necessarily be that type. See what you guys are saying in the chat box. Jacob says, what about Kasper Dolberg? I don't think he's necessarily kicked on too much since joining Nice from Ajax. Personally, I thought he had a very decent Euros, but I don't think he's necessarily kicked on at Nice. But he does have those qualities of being able to hold the ball up and bring others into play. Raul Jimenez, again, towards the older end of the 20s spectrum, and I'm not sure that's the type of age profile that Arsenal would be going for. Matt Alexander says, Tom, should we have gotten Saliba to sign a contract extension before going out on loan? Now, I've seen a couple of you saying that supposedly that has now been announced. I'm still waiting to see. Is it indeed? Yes, Saliba has officially been announced to be moving on. let's get that up and let's react to some of that news. In regards to kind of rounding off our chat about Tammy Abraham, I think it's been a good chat. Do leave it in the comment section below what your thoughts are about Tammy Abraham and tell me why. That's the key thing. We can all throw out yeses and nos, but I want to know your reasoning. I want to know why you wouldn't necessarily have Tammy Abraham, or rather you would have Tammy Abraham at the club. Let's share the screen and go over to the Marseille situation, which means I will probably have to turn out changing the thumbnail and stuff for this show, which is fine. Let's have a look. Last season, William spent 6 months on loan with Nice. During his time there, the 20-year-old defender made 22 appearances with the Agneaux, finishing the campaign in 9th. The France youth international joined us in a permanent deal from Saint-Etienne in July of 2019 and spent 2019-20 back on loan with the Ligue 1 side, helping them reach the 2020 Coupe de France final. Technical Director Edu, this is going to be interesting, says, together with William, we have decided it will be good for his continued development to spend another season on loan. William joined us as an 18-year-old and he is still only 20, so he is still developing all the time. William is a player with strong natural ability and next season has the potential to be really beneficial for him and Marseille, a good club. To play another season in Liga will be very important for his development. We will, of course, be keeping in close contact with William during the season and wish him all the best in France with Marseille. Everyone at Arsenal wishes William well with Marseille next season. Nothing in regards to kind of what Arteta's got to say about it. Nothing in regards to what he has got to say about it. Nothing in regards to a contract extension. You know, it's... The Saliba situation is always going to come down and divide the fan base for me. And I look at that and I go, I'm just not quite sure whether we will ever see Saliba play in an Arsenal shirt in the future. I hope that we do. I really genuinely hope that we do see Saliba play at Arsenal in the future. And I think for me, a loan is the right decision at this stage. When you consider the fact that we are looking to be bringing in a £50 million+ signing. The fact that Saliba has played 38 league games in 3 years at Saint-Etienne across 2 seasons and Nice last season. He needs a full season under his belt. He needs to be playing week in, week out. And he simply, for me, does not get that at Arsenal this season. Whether or not we believe he will be that player or could have been that player for us this season, whether or not you feel that he was good enough or not to start for Arsenal, the likelihood and the reality of the situation is that he probably wouldn't have started for Arsenal. In that case, he would have been on the bench. And, you know, in that sense, he certainly would not be playing enough to get the development that he desperately needs. And that's kind of my feelings on Saliba. I want to hear what you guys have got to say. Yo-Yo says, Saliba's long gone. He's been disrespected for too long by this club. I think there's definitely a hyperbole around this. I don't think the club has disrespected him other than how they actually, you know, they haven't disrespected him. That's a very, very harsh terminology to use. Disrespecting someone is not what Arsenal have done in this situation. They have mismanaged William Saliba a lot. The situation has been completely poorly handled. They haven't disrespected him. That is quite hyperbolic. I think when you look at what he's actually done and some of the things that have gone on behind the scenes, it is going to create friction. But the whole situation at the start of last season where they didn't sort out a loan for Saliba is just unforgivable, really, considering the fact that they desperately needed to get him out if they didn't want to get him playing because it was the best thing for him to get more development. And had he had a full season, say he'd played the first 6 months of last campaign and the whole season, including that time at Nice, and played as he did for a whole year, maybe he would have a better opportunity to convince Arteta that he should be in the squad this season. But it didn't happen. And that's the biggest problem for Saliba, is ultimately getting regular game time to be able to prove that he deserves a place in this Arsenal team. As Edu said, he is still only 20, and there aren't too many 20-year-old defenders out there playing week in, week out for a size of club like Arsenal. Wesley Fofana at Leicester is the situation that's always brought up because he played for the same team, lo and behold, that he did. And he's now played a lot for Leicester where, let's be real, he wouldn't have been given those same amount of opportunities had they not had their injury crisis at the back. He would have been probably eased in. And then this season, you probably would have been seeing Fofana explode like the first season that we saw Soyuncu really break out. He had a season where he was brought in from Freiburg, played here and there in his first campaign, didn't get too many minutes, and in the next season, he was then flourishing at Leicester. And I think that's the way they probably would have handled Fofana in the same kind of way. But because of injuries, it forced Fofana into the limelight, and he flourished. It was a trial by fire, and he passed with flying colours. You can't look at one and then not the other. For me, that's the difficulty with this. I think you need to learn the parallels that you can take, and you need to look at the players together and say, look, one's one player, one's another player. They're different, and you need to treat them separately. So that's where we would go. Tammy says, I think Arteta is protecting him. What if he makes a mistake and costs us a game? The same fans would turn on him. I'm not sure that they would, Tammy. I see your point. I think there is a little bit, there's so much kind of a cult following around William Saliba that in itself is very, very kind of volatile, and it's very there's almost, I feel like there's, in some cases, he can do no wrong and has done no wrong, and no matter what happens now, will always be looked upon as someone who was, as is put by some people in the chat, disrespected, which I think is an exaggeration of the situation. Definitely. Let's go. Yo-Yo's explained himself, which is fine. He joined the club as a Gooner and will leave the club disliking Arsenal, mostly at the fault of others, hence why I use such emotive words. It's the fault of, obviously, the recruitment side. Purely for me, at the end of the 1920 summer, I'm really struggling to see beyond that moment what the big problems have been dealing with Saliba. Sending him back on loan to Saint-Etienne during that year where we signed him was absolutely fine. We then got him back for the summer. There were some issues behind the scenes regarding what went on with the French Cup final. And whatever happened behind the scenes, we will never find out the true kind of truth behind that. But it meant that there was some friction. It then was the case where the club messed up the loan situation for Saliba at the start of that season. You fast forward to January. The club get him a loan immediately, right at the start of the January window in 2021. He goes out, has 20 good games for Nice, which totals up to 38 across 3 years. This season, they're then sending him out on loan to a club of what we were told by David Ornstein was his choosing. Now, I would have personally really pushed for a Premier League club, personally. However, it seems to be, according to The Athletic, that he picked, is the word that they use, Marseille, which, is a shame. However, he is still hopefully going to play week in, week out with Marseille and in Europe next season. So I think that the level of how people say he's been treated is definitely exaggerated. But what I would say is that it certainly has not been a well-handled situation by the club by any stretch of the imagination. Cookie Monster says, do you worry about Eddie's relationship with Keir? The photo of him, Raul, and Keir is worrying. Keir is his agent, so he's always going to have that relationship with him, as far as I'm aware. Regarding Raul, they were colleagues. They worked together, and they probably became close friends, as plenty of people do when they are on holiday, where they work with people. So I wouldn't read too much into it, Cookie. I really wouldn't. I don't think it's an issue whatsoever at this state of time, specifically that example anyway. Darren says, if we bring Saliba back next season, do we really think that he will sign a new contract with us? Surely he will want away. At the end of the day, Darren, we just don't know. If they've had discussions behind the closed doors and said, look, we're going to send you on loan this season, we all agree that this is the right plan, you're going to come back and fight for your place. Say he smashes the first 6 months at Arsenal, and when he comes back, Arsenal will push to try and sign him for a new contract. I mean, think about how certain we were that following Balogun was going to leave, and yet he turns things around. How many times did we say Balogun's being mistreated, Balogun's not being given a chance, Balogun this, Balogun that? Lo and behold, Balogun signs a new contract with the club. So I wouldn't say it's set in stone right now. I wouldn't say it's predetermined, and I wouldn't say it's certainly sorted out for the future based upon what we've seen already. Answer says, people adapt differently, Tom, so I really don't like comparing these two situations. I believe mentality-wise, Fofana is more mature. And I don't like comparing the Fofana-Saliba situation at all. I think they are very, very different situations. Vinny says, people having a meltdown over nothing. Saliba is going out and getting the experience he needs. There could be a personal reason as to why he wants to be in France, which is obviously something that we would never know. All we can know is the facts right now, and is that we're told that he supposedly picked that route, and so we can analyze that decision. And for me, I would say that I think it's the wrong decision and that he should have gone to a place in England to get that key experience of playing in the same, environment that he would be playing in for Arsenal. But we don't know all the facts, and so we can only speculate on what we do know. Ben P says people clamour for him to play for us, yet we don't have Europe to rotate him and develop him properly, especially if we get Ben White. Michael says if Saliba was the Mbappe of centre-backs, he would be starting at Arsenal. Coaches don't want to lose just to prove some kind of point. I think there is always going to be an element of a coach's ego that will lead them to play some players over others. Unfortunately, that's just the way the world is, and that's the way humans are at times. So I wouldn't completely agree with you fully, but I do think in this scenario, it is not beyond all reckoning, as Harry Symeou and me talked about with Dan Potts the other day, that at the end of the day, Saliba was signed under a different coach, under a different head of recruitment, head of technical director, head of football, all of that stuff. It was under Raul Sanyehi, it was under Unai Emery, and for me, that when Arteta comes in and Edu comes in, to have a look at a player that you've not chosen to bring in and decide that you don't think he's ready yet, I don't think there's much wrong with that, to be honest, at all. What I do think is wrong is how you mismanage the situation to then let him fester in the under-23s for 6 months. That's the biggest and only real issue that I've had with the Saliba situation of how it's been handled. Beyond that, I don't see any. People bring up the cup final, not letting him play in the cup final, but I'm sorry. If Saint Etienne are asking us to pay them more money to play our player for them in a cup competition where he could get injured, that's, to me, ludicrous. It's ludicrous to think that we would pay a team money to play our own player at risk of injury. That's crazy. So I wouldn't necessarily go along with that. And for me, the loan, it makes sense. Yes, he should be given a chance. I thought he should have been given a chance, but I don't think it's going to happen this season because we are signing a £50 million centre-back. And whether or not you think he's better or as good as Ben White, etc., it doesn't matter at the end of the day. If we were going to be playing Saliba, we wouldn't be buying a £50 million centre-back. So that's the reality. No matter what we think about it, he isn't going to play. So it's best that he goes somewhere so he can do what we all want him to do and prove Arteta wrong so he can then play. We will wait and see. Social says, people are forgetting Saliba isn't an Arteta signing. Price, age, or potential ability doesn't mean that you're right for a certain system by a new manager. It's clear as day that Saliba will never play for us. I hope that we're wrong on this. I hope that we do see him play one day. It's just really difficult to see that happening. Let's scroll up a little bit more. Grass Patch, going back to the Abraham stuff, says, I think Abraham would be a good signing. He's totally different to our current strikers, and he's a handful. Rahil says, can we talk about Tammy more or what his price tag is? £40 million is the reported price tag for Tammy Abraham. We have talked a lot about him at the start of the video. I'm probably going to split. This has been split really into two halves. The Tammy Abraham first half, the Saliba second half. So plenty to talk about there. Rossi HD says, Emile Smith-Rowe gets number 10. Does that mean Maddison would want to be the number 10, to be the focal point of the team if we sign him? I had a discussion about this earlier on social media. I don't think that the number 10 shirt is like a huge draw that would sway a player from joining or not joining a team. Just because Smith-Rowe has now taken the number 10 doesn't necessarily mean that James Maddison now wouldn't come. I mean, Mesut Ozil joined and became the number 11 because Jack Wilshere had the number 10 already. For me, it's not a big deal. It's not as big of a deal as I think some people do make out. Sure, people want to be the number 10, but I'd much rather that we confirmed that Emile Smith-Rowe was signing a new contract by giving him the number 10 shirt as kind of that, that emphasis, that responsibility. You're taking the shirt. We see you as the future. Other than going, we're going to give you the number 8 shirt and it risks maybe, not giving him that same confidence, which is such a key factor when it comes to committing to a new contract at the club. We've had a super chat from Vegas Guy. Thank you ever so much, mate. He says, hi, Tom. Do you think we'll inquire about the Chelsea players first, or do you think they will offer them to us? It seems like we initiate first contact. I think that Arsenal, when they've gone into this transfer window, have had a list. They've had a list of players that they want to get in different positions from plan A through to plan Z. They've got all these different players on their radar that they're interested in. Sometimes what happens is reports will come out that have guessed very well what those players are, or they've been tipped off by certain contacts and sources within the club that they trust that Arsenal are indeed interested in certain players, or it's been leaked by a player's agent is another route of that. I don't. It's not about Arsenal necessarily always going for kind of like that first contact and initiating that first contact, because so much transfer business these days takes place via WhatsApp. It is all possible that the agent of Abraham has texted someone within the Arsenal system and said, look, maybe you're in for a striker. Abraham is available. Would you be interested? And then the conversation flows on from there. It's a very realistic situation that is indeed what happened. So I don't think it's about Arsenal always initiating first contact. Clubs will certainly be reaching out through their player agents to try and facilitate deals for players. Arsenal will be doing it for the amount of players that they want to see moved on. There'll be plenty of teams being offered to sign Kolasinac, offered to sign Nketiah, offered to sign Nelson. All of these players were being offered about to other clubs. So I wouldn't read too much into that one whatsoever. Michael says, I would take Abraham only if we can sell Lacazette for a similar amount of money. I think would be a big push. If you think about it, Michael, you've got Lacazette, not homegrown, 30 years old, 1 year left on his deal. You've got Tammy Abraham, 23, English, homegrown, has scored more goals in a single Premier League season than Lacazette has over the last 3 years. And then you've got a situation where he's under contract and Chelsea are definitely in the driving seat in regards to his future. I don't think you're ever going to get a similar price for either of those two players, unfortunately. The Real Yanis, so happy to have you back in the chat. The Real Yanis, by the way, if you didn't know, and we told you about this the other day, the Real Yanis decided to donate his £120 winnings from the Euro 2020 sweepstake to Gooners versus Cancer. He's an absolute legend, so make sure you give him some love in the chat box. But thank you so much for a further donation. Yanis, he says, hola, amigo. High press with the Athletic centre-backs with pace. That would be Neves, be a better fit than Basuma, considering he won't need as much athleticism to track instead of being more effective when on the ball. It's interesting we talk about Basuma and Neves. I think they're two different players in two different positions. I think Basuma is more closer to your 6. Neves is much closer to your number 8 position. And I actually think that you could go out and sign both for the midfield. If it was a choice between one or the other, I would choose Basuma for his more disciplined style and approach, and the fact that we've got Lokonga seemingly coming in. But we still need another centre midfielder. I genuinely think that we need 2 more on top of Lokonga. That's the situation we find ourselves in, but I very much doubt that is going to happen. But thank you, the Real Yanis. Really appreciate that. And you're an absolute legend for donating your winnings to Gooners versus Cancer. Speaking of which, if you do and like to play FIFA and you like making a mug of YouTube content creators, you can in fact get involved with the FIFA tournament that's happening at the start of August on Gooners versus Cancer. All you need to do is donate $25. You can do it on Xbox or PlayStation. I'm going to be playing on the Xbox tournament. So if you want the chance to be able to mug me off and embarrass me in front of your friends, then get involved with that tournament. It's over on the Gooners Pod on Twitter. Go and find that. If you just type in Gooners versus Cancer into your Google account, it will come up. You will be able to find it. Suraj Sai says he's the most trustable ITK there is. The Real Yanis has become our resident ITK in our Discord server as well. It's absolute legend as he is. Zahil says, Tom, thoughts on Coop Miners? I would take him over Awar. Are there any tactical breakdowns on Coop Miners, Sam Johnston and Tammy planned? Yes, there is. I'm planning on doing some tactical breakdowns on all 3 of these. Abraham should be coming out very soon because I've already identified the expert insight for that. So you may be getting that tomorrow. In regards to Toyn Coop Miners, should I be able to get the expert insight for that over the next 48 hours or so? Hopefully it will be coming out in the same kind of time span. And on Sam Johnston, whilst it's only interest, it is still probably worth us doing a little bit more digging on him. And so I'll endeavor to try and get you some expert insight on him, and we'll be doing some extra shows. So make sure you drop a subscription on the channel to get all that content and make sure that you don't miss out. And if you never want to miss a show, it's really important that you click that notification bell because it will tell you when we are going live. So make sure you get hold of all of that good stuff and then you won't miss a thing. Omar says, Tom, I am tired of Chelsea players joining us and flopping. So Abraham, not for me. Omar, you need to get over that trend. As we talked about at the start of the show, just because it happened to some doesn't mean it'll happen to others. This is not me justifying a move for Abraham. All I'm saying is that you can't just picture a player or assess a player based upon where they came from. It's really important. I know it's tough. It's really tough to not do that after we've seen what's happened with Chelsea players before, but it is important that you try and separate and analyze on an individual and kind of closed analysis basis. Omar says, what do you think of Barella? I mean, I doubt that would ever happen. It would take a ridiculous amount of money to convince Inter Milan to sell. Would I take him? Absolutely. but no chance that I think it would happen. Not at all. Yo-Yo says, would signing Abraham or any other striker ensure Aubameyang returns to the left? I mean, Aubameyang's got 2 years left on his current deal. Would it ensure he returns to the left? It's always going to push him maybe to play in the left. Maybe it means we extend on a 2-striker system that we saw in pre-season. I very much doubt that would be the case, but it's certainly something that I think that we should be looking to improve on. Makes sense, Tom, but I honestly don't rate it. And that's fine, Omar. That's your opinion, and you're entitled to it. And if he was to sign, I hope that you would hope that he succeeds absolutely and proves us all wrong, even with our own reservations about the players. Rahil says, Coop Miners, Netherlands international, 23-year-old, so he's really good just based upon those characteristics. Well, hopefully we'll find out in a future tactical breakdown how good the Dutch midfielder is. I'm happy that we're finally doing it and we've finally seen a link to him, because I've been waiting all kind of summer, and then the links to Atalanta at one point really kind of hit me for 6, in the sense that, really, are we going to let him move to Atalanta? Why don't we move on that? So, you know, that was good to see that has maybe died down a bit, and Arsenal could be going to there. Alex, yeah, I mean, I saw this link that you're talking about. It's gone very quiet on that front. So there's no confirmation on going to Atalanta so far whatsoever. There was an interest immediately quite a couple of months ago or so. Nothing in regards to what's going on currently. I think we might finish things off there, because I now need to go and change the thumbnail and change the title of the video because of Saliba's news breaking. Thank you ever so much, guys, for tuning in. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow morning at 8 p.m. But if you've not had enough of this terrible face, you can join me on a Chronicles of a Gooner with Harry Symeou at 8 o'clock. We're going to be talking more about Tammy Abraham and a couple more things. So make sure you join us over on the Chronicles of a Gooner channel. I'll be joining Harry Symeou for that. Looking forward to it. Good guy, as always. But it's been a pleasure to speak to you guys. Please drop a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel as always. And please do go check out the work that's been going on over at 101 Great Goals as well. And as always, up the Arsenal.